Okay, and okay. So I hope you guys are able to see my screen. Yes. So yesterday we completed two topics, gift tax and estate tax. Our target was to complete the final 1040 return, but due to time constraint. But let's just cover up this today quickly, and then we'll move to the foreign related topics, which is going to most probably be asked in exam. Okay, so any tax, which any income tax which we are going to pay for a deceased person, anyone who died. Okay, I already give you an example yesterday. So anyone who died in the tax year, you need to check which tax year the person is dying. Let's say the person died in 2024, anytime between Jan to December 2024, you are going to file a final tax on the due date of that particular tax year, that is 15th April 25. Okay, so that we already covered in the yesterday's class. Just remember the deadline will always be 15th April. Don't get confused between the estate tax deadline, the 1040 final return deadline, and the trust returns. All three deadlines, the trust return is like actual deadline 15th April. So trust and final return which you're going to file will have this like 15th April deadline. It will not get changed. Okay, so majorly you should remember that if the person dies somewhere between the tax season, so from Jan 24 till 15th April 2024, if the person dies, then in that case, whatever his 2023 tax return. Okay, so can I say between Jan to December 23, the person was alive for full year. That will not be a final return. The person died in which tax year? 2024. Then you have to file the final return on 15th April 2025. Okay, so just remember the concept. Don't mug up the deadlines and anything. It's just check the tax year in which the person is diseased. That tax year deadline will fall in next year, so next year you have to file the tax return. Okay, so just remember that. Now, surviving spouse, if surviving spouse is not going to marry, surviving spouse will be filing a joint return with the deceased person. Okay, whoever is dying, with that person, the surviving spouse is going to file a joint return. In I think tomorrow's session, maybe we are going to take the filing status and credit. There again, you will see this concept that even the person dies in the year of death, we are still going to consider as a MFJ filers for the tax filing thing. Okay. Then, if surviving spouse is going to remarry, then make sure that MFJ return should be filed with the new spouse. Okay. Let's take an example. Mr. A and Mrs. A are married. Mr. A died. Okay. Died in, I will take the same date, June 30, 2024. So for 2024 tax return, you will consider Mrs. A filing status as a MFJ, and you are going to file as a 1040 married filing joint return on 15th April 2025. That's the same deadline for individuals. Okay, only the thing is you have to mention that the name of the one of the spouse should be mentioned, and the date of death should be mentioned. It should be given in the tax return, like it should be mentioned specifically in the tax return to report it to the IRS that the spouse has been deceased. Okay, but let's take the same example. Mr. A died in Jan and Mrs. A got remarried somewhere in December 24. Okay, so because Mrs. A got remarried, she has to file a MFJ with the new spouse, and for the deceased spouse, we are going to file as a 1040 final return. Okay, without any MFJ. See, Mrs. A will be reported only on one return. She cannot file two MFJs, one with the deceased and one with the new. Okay, so make sure, be very clear with that. This MFJ return will be filed with the new spouse. For the old spouse, the person who died, for that person, you are going to file as a MFS, and it is going to be considered as a 1040 final return. Okay, you have to mention the date of death and everything in the return. Got it, guys? Yes, MFS, correct. Now, yes, one thing I wanted to mention that in yesterday's session, just after your class, we also took part two session. If you guys have a little bit time, just go and watch the part 2 day 1 revision. It's all about the trust taxation, estate taxation, and also like both lectures are important for both the parts. That's what I would recommend. Okay, so any court appointed representative is being appointed for taking care of the estate and taking care of the descendants tax filing, then representative can revoke the MFJ filing for the surviving spouse and ask the surviving spouse to file a separate MFS return, because there can be some tax related consequences, or there can be some benefits, or there can be some disadvantages. So accordingly, the representative, whoever has been appointed to take care of the filing of the deceased person, okay, that court representative can suggest or can revoke the MFJ filing status. Okay, it's not mandatory, but they can revoke the MFJ filing status. For your exam purpose, you just have to remember, on if the deceased person, Mr. A, is married person to Mrs. A, then Mrs. A is always going to file a MFJ even if the spouse is dead. Okay, so this is one thing. Now, income in respect of descendant, this we did in part 2 class yesterday. Just to give you a heads up, it's a simple process. Like whatever income you are going to earn, whatever income the deceased person's estate is going to earn, that is called as a IRD, income in respect of descendant. So all income that descendant would have received had the death not occurred. For example, the death occurred on 30th of June. So from 1st Jan till June, whatever income you have earned is reported on your 1040 final return. But after that, if he would have not been dead on this date, whatever income he is still earning, like his estate is still earning, is called as a income in respect of descendant. Okay, and that was not previously included on the final return, so here it is not included. Just remember, we are going to understand this. If it's a cash method, you might have to include it earlier also, or sorry, if it's an accrual method, you might have included it earlier. So anything which is already included on your 1040 final return, okay, just here, 1040 final return is not your IRD. Please understand, anything which is not included on your 1040 return is your IRD, which is already included is not your IRD. Okay, got it, guys? So when this confusion will come into picture, when we are going to file either on cash method or on accrual method. No, IRD is not included on trust return. IRD, there's one question. IRD is included in trust return? No, income in respect of descendant is something. Um, it's a terminology. It's not. You will never see anywhere in the practical return. It's just a terminology which they have assigned to a type of income. Okay, let's say Mr. A is having, best example is having a lot of rental properties, right? So when the person dies, his rental property is still earning some income. So actually, this is a rental income, but the terminology we will use is this is a IRD, because who is going to pay tax on this income? The beneficiaries are going to pay the tax. Okay, so when this income is distributed to beneficiaries, it is called as income in respect of descendants. It is considered taxable in the descendants return. So yes, when you file a trust tax return, right, so in trust tax you have to report your income, you have to report this, but ideally it's a income in respect of descendant, because the actual taxpayers on this income will be there, beneficiaries. They will receive a K1 from the trust return. Okay, so it's not like it's included in estate or trust or something. It's just a terminology which you have to understand what is IRD. Sometimes in exam questions they use this terminology, so people get confused. What is IRD? This is just a term assigned to the type of income on which the tax will be paid by the beneficiary. Because obviously, if a person dies, what will happen to his income? Okay, it will be distributed, and the income distributed to the beneficiary, they are liable to pay the tax. So that income is called as income in respect of descendant. We cannot call this income in respect of deceased. In respect of descendant, their beneficiaries will be paying that income. Okay, great. So next is the type of the methods which you can use for filing the tax return will be your cash method, will be your accrual method, right? So cash method is simple, like you have to select a checkbox, a small yes or no question kind of thing, which method you're using to file your taxes. So even if you file a 1040 final return, then at that time also, if you selected, because see, ideally if the person is alive, it doesn't matter cash or accrual method. They don't give a lot of thinking on whether to select cash or accrual. But when you're filing a 1040 final return, it's important to decide cash or accrual, because whatever income you're not including on 1040 final return, that descend, it is considered as a income in respect of descendant, and it will be included in estate and then later on in the trust. Okay, so yes, cash method means what? As and when you receive the income, as and when you actually receive the income, okay, it is considered as a taxable income in your return. So if the best example is, let's say, the dividend. Okay, this thing actually I have explained in part 2, so that's fine. It's also the part of your part 1 topic. So whatever income you are going to receive, let's take an example. If it's a dividend, it is declared, it might be declared somewhere in the month of May. The death took place on 30th of June, but it got actually, it received actually in the bank on 1st of July. So can I say the receipt date is after the date of death? But if you are using a cash method, then the dividend income is considered as a IRD. It's not a part of your 1040 final return, because cash, in cash method, the simple rule is as and when you receive the income, as and when you actually receive the amount, at that time you should make it taxable. That's the cash method for filing the tax returns. In accrual method, it's opposite. So as soon as it is been declared, the income is accrued, you are anyways going to receive it. So if you're using the accrual method, dividend is not your income in respect of descendant. Dividend should be included on your 1040 final return. Okay, this is one of the example. Just like that, take an example of rental income, or even if a person is doing some business, so schedule C business, anything which is been accrued but not yet received, right? If you're going to file the return on accrual method, it has to be included on your 1040 final return. Clear, guys? So this is what is about IRD and types of method you should file. Now, if in case of capital asset and other asset, income in respect of descendant, capital asset is going to receive a step up basis that we have seen in yesterday's class in uh, estate tax returns. When you're going to file, you have to report it on FMV basis in your estate return, right? It's a one time transfer tax which you're paying, because after that all the assets are getting transferred to the beneficiaries. So that's your, capital asset is always going to receive a step up. Means nothing but the person bought the asset at cost basis, but now he has to pay, his estate has to pay a tax which will be on the FMV. Okay, and don't forget about the lifetime exclusion which we are going to allow on the taxable income. Okay, next is other assets. Anything which is other than capital asset, there won't be any adjustment. So let's say passive incomes are there, there are some capital gains are there. Let's say the asset has been sold, it's not transferred to beneficiaries, but it has been sold. when the person was alive. So the capital gain, those other things will not receive any adjustment to the basis. Okay. Next is medical expense deduction. When a person dies, it is possible that at the time of death, the medical expenses which he incurred might be paid after the death, or it is not yet paid, or it is paid before the death. Okay, so there are some scenarios over here. If it is paid before the date of death, then yes, simple. It's a very simple calculation. Just put it in the itemized deduction as a medical expenses on the final tax return. I already mentioned, like, final tax return is exactly your 1040. There's no different format. Unlike like estate and gift tax and trust return, they have a different, totally different forms. It's still in your final return, final tax return, it's still the 1040 form. Only have to select one check mark box that this is the final return and put the date of death for that particular person. Okay, all the expenses will be allowed, even for the self, for spouse, for dependent. It's normal 1040 return which you are filing, and all medical expense which are paid before the date of death, everything will be allowed on the 1040 final return. Let's say now the date, on the date of death, still there are some outstanding medical expenses. Let's say it's a huge bill which has not yet been paid. Okay, so in that situation, what will happen? They will have one option. If those outstanding medical expenses are being paid by the estate within 1 year from the date of death, right, then those medical expenses are allowed as an itemized deduction on the 1040 final return. Okay, now don't ask me, like, let's say they have already filed the 1040 final return, then later on the expenses are being paid by the estate and it's within 1 year. Then how the calculation can be done, or how you can go back and amend the return or file the return? Yes, you can go back, amend the return, include the itemized deduction. But many times the planning has been done by the representative, by the executor, who is going to finally file both the returns together. Okay, so yes, there are options to go back and amend and include it again in the itemized deduction. Next is losses deduction. Net operating losses. If a person is going to have some losses, carry forward losses. Okay, let's say prior year there were some capital losses, there were some business related net operating losses which has been carried forward. All needs to be settled off in the final return. It cannot get transferred to the estate or trust further. So loss deduction is only limited till the final return. But if I talk about the credits, all credits are allowed. It's not like that the person is, like, the person is dead. Now he will not get any credits which are available for the individual, like child tax credit, all the expenses which he might have incurred for education. So education related credit, every credits is going to work as it is. There's no changes in the credits when a person dies. Okay, all the rules will remain apply same for that particular deceased person. Okay, terrorist or a military action related forgiveness. So let's say a person died because of some terrorist or military action, and because of that they have exempted certain income to that deceased person, then it will be non-taxable. So see, non-taxable to the descendants, so even to them, to the deceased and to the beneficiaries, it will be non-taxable. Estate distribution, even the estate is going to distribute that income to their beneficiaries, it is non-taxable. This applies to whom? To the members of US Armed Force at the time of death, dies from the wound or injury incurred during active duty. In the year of death, it is non taxable. In the year of wound injury, it is non taxable. So let's say the person got injured in 2023, and because of that injury, he died in 2024. So in 2023 and 2024, both year, they will declare certain amount, certain forgiveness amount, or they will give some amount, just like an insurance proceeds, but something in the form of forgiveness. Whatever amount has been received, it will be non taxable. 1 year prior to the injury. Okay, so let's say in this year he is injured. 1 year prior means since 2022, 23, but actually he died in 2024. All 3 years, whatever forgiveness he has received, will be considered as a non-taxable. Even in 1040 final return, you have to declare it. It's not like you don't have to report it. Always remember, in US taxation, non-taxable exempt doesn't mean you don't have to report it at all in the return. You have to do a data entry in your tax return, but you need to make sure you're doing it in the proper schedule, proper form. If it's an exempt income, if it's a non-taxable, if it's like non-deductible, sorry, non-taxable and exempt, yeah, these are the two words. So make sure you do it, the data entry in the proper schedules. That's what is all in, I think, descendant return. Okay, so if you guys have any question, as I mentioned, you can just put it in the chat box. We are going to start with the new topic, that is foreign taxpayers and accounts. So mainly, I'll share one small chart just after this, explaining this whole topic. I have received a feedback from students who appeared in the exam that they're asking the form numbers on the foreign tax. So I've created small PDF of all the form numbers which are used in the, mainly in the foreign related topic. At the end, we'll just go through that small PDF. Okay. So what happens when you are a US citizen, but you are also earning some income from other country? Okay, so let me give a small example. A US citizen who is earning foreign income. So think, see, I know mostly people are joining from India, so don't think foreign income means, don't get confused. Foreign income means any income which they are earning other than US income. Okay, so think like that. Or it can also happen that you are just a US resident, not a citizen, because we will see the residency criteria. Because if you are staying in US, if like your certain number of days are exceeding above that, if you're staying in US, you will be considered as a US resident, and you are earning some income from foreign, again the same terminology, from foreign countries. If you're earning some income, then there will be some different rules, we will see that. Okay, now please understand that first you need to be clear what is considered as a resident. Okay, if you are already fulfilling the green card test, you are a green card holder. Okay, or if you're fulfilling the substantial presence test, then you will be considered as a resident. And yes, all your worldwide income will be subject to tax in US. Okay, and the maximum rate, there's a slab rate, so no need to remember or mug up the slab rates. When we'll do in tomorrow's session, when we'll see the filing status topic, I'll go through the slab rates, but no need to mug up. No calculation needs to be remembered for calculating the tax liability, how to calculate tax liability. No need to remember that. Okay, so maximum slab rate will be 37%, and you have to file 1040. In case of resident, you have to file a 1040. But if you are a non-resident, let's say you are not fulfilling any of this criteria, then yes, you have to file 1040, but you have to report yourself as a non-resident, so it will be 1040 NR. Okay, so let's see. In case of non-resident alien, if a taxpayer is married at the end of the year to a resident, it happens that a non-resident is marrying to a resident, then taxpayer can choose to file return either as a resident or as a non-resident alien. It's at the discretion of the taxpayer. They will see what are the benefits and what are the disadvantages. Accordingly, they can go for either 1040 NR or a 1040 normal return. Okay, and taxpayer will be only taxed on US source income, and they have to file a 1040 NR. In this situation, let's say taxpayer plus spouse. Okay, now taxpayer is going to be considered as a taxed on US source income plus foreign source income if the taxpayer is a US citizen or a US resident, because the simple rule is worldwide income is subject to tax. But the spouse, let's take an example, the spouse is a non-resident alien, and and the spouse is recently married to a resident person, to a citizen. So this spouse has an option to either file as a 1040 or 1040 NR. If the spouse elects to file as a 1040 NR, spouse has to report only the US related income, not the worldwide income. Okay, please remember that. And if the spouse is selecting, no, I will file a 1040 return, I will file a MFG filing return with the taxpayer. So just for that doesn't mean the spouse is considered as a resident. The status doesn't change. It's just for the tax purpose. Just for the tax purpose, spouse will be considered as a resident, and in case of resident, worldwide income will be taxable. Okay, so yes, it's in case of non-resident alien, it's at the option of the spouse if they are married. But let's say it's just a single person who is just a NR, they will always have to file a 1040 NR. Okay, got it, guys? So we'll see what is substantial presence test. It's there in the next few pages. Okay, we'll see that in the next page. Non-resident alien will be earning three specific type of income. Okay, let's say Mr. X is a non-resident alien, right? Either Mr. X is going to earn some income from independent personal services. He's just providing some personal services, or he is going to run a business. So he will have a effectively connected income, or he is earning some passive incomes, that is FDAP, fixed determinable annual periodic income. Okay, so in this three situation there are different calculations. You don't have to remember any calculations. Those who are working in practical life, they might already know about it, but for your EA exams they are not going to ask a detailed calculation questions. It's all about understanding the concept and theory, okay, on this topic. So independent personal services which is performed in the foreign, or if you are getting a direct payment from the foreign country. So please remember, foreign country for this non-resident is any income you're receiving from other than US. So any foreign source income, it will be considered as a independent personal services. Means what? You are just providing them some services. There's no trading business or anything. Effectively connected income means you are actively conducting your business which is connected with US. Okay, I'll give you one example. Many people in different countries, what they do is they incorporate a business in US, and mostly all the partners, or all the people, all the members are mostly foreign people, and they are considered as a non-resident alien, but they have a active income generation in US. Yes, they have to file a tax return in US. Okay, not the 1040, not the 1040 thing. It depends on the corporate's status, either it's a C corp, or if they are generating proper active income or not. So for this, I think we have done this topic in detail in class. So just let me know if you have any question. You can put it in chat box. US earned income is considered as taxable at the slab rate, whatever effectively connected. If you're going to earn active income, and if you're a non-resident, active income means what? Your active participation should be there. Okay, that's your active business which is running in the US. But sometimes what people do, just they put some investment in US. So that is considered as your rental income, interest income, dividend income. That will be taxed at flat 30%. Okay, so independent personal services, it's considered as a foreign source income. Effectively connected business, it is considered at a normal slab rate. Your active income slab rate will be applicable, 1040 slab rates will be applicable. But for your passive incomes, rental, interest, dividend, 30% will be considered. Or if there is a tax treaty between two countries, okay, let's say the person is a resident of India, and Indian resident, and the person is earning some income from US, and that is in the form of the rent. Any passive income is earning, then yes, he has to pay 30% taxes in US. Now you have to check the treaty between India and US. If the treaty gives some lower rate of taxes, you will apply the lower rate. Let's say if treaty says that only 25% will be applicable on the passive incomes, then I use 25%, okay, to pay the taxes. Next is privilege not for NR. If a person is a non-resident and they are earning this incomes, they have to file the tax in US. In that situation, you cannot claim any standard deduction. You cannot file as a MFJ or head of household, and there won't be any standard deduction applicable to a non-resident. You have to file a 1040 NR tax return. Got it, guys? So make sure that, even if the question is asking, like, let's say they will get some standard deduction, so your actual standard deduction you will not get. There is a different standard deduction limits. We'll see in the next page. Different standard deduction limits are specifically applicable to the 1040 NR. I think it's 14600 something. So yes. Next is, what do you mean by okay, there's one question, except capital gain. So, capital gain will not be considered for 30%. Capital gain will be considered as a capital gain tax rate. Now, if you have completed the topic, the business property transaction topic or the capital gain topic, you might be aware about the capital gain tax rates. Those are different from the normal tax rates. Okay, 10%, 15%, 20%. So not 10, sorry, 0, 15, 20, right? So those will still apply to the capital gain transactions, right? But yes, you have to report it in 1040 NR. Okay. Next is effectively connected income. What do you mean by effectively connected income? There are two tests which you should check whether your business is falling under ECI or not. If it's not falling under ECI, you are not you are not going to tax it at a slab rate, right? So how you're going to consider, check the business activity test. So your income gains and losses comes from the activity of US trade or business. Okay, all your business activities must be incurred. All your business activities are performed in US. Okay. And asset use test means income from US asset used in conduct of US trade or business. So let's say you are maintaining some assets in US, and from that asset you are generating revenue. That income is considered as a effectively connected income. Okay, so at least your asset should be there, and plus there has to be an active business. It should not be a passive. It should not be like, you're just renting your property. The property is being used in the business. You have converted that property into your commercial building. Even though your presence is not there, still that asset is generating the revenue. You are one of the partner or one of the member of that member of the C corporation. Then you need to show it on your 1040 NR as a active income. Okay, effectively connected income. Next is, if a person is a resident, it's very simple rule. Anything which you earn, even from US, even from outside US, everything needs to be reported on your 1040 tax return. So who is considered as a resident? If you fulfill the green card test, you have a green card, you are a lawful permanent resident in US. Second is substantial presence test, where you need to check the number of days criteria. So in 20 for your exams, you need to check 3 tax years. Yes, the current year for your tax filing, you are going to use 2024 as a tax year, right? So 2024 plus 2023 plus 2022. So for 2024, if your presence is at least 31 days in US during 24, okay? Plus, along with this, you should also fulfill one more condition. The total of the presence for all these 3 years should be 183 days. Okay, but it's not like just take each and every days which are present. For 2024, take full 100% of days present. For 2023, take one third of the days present. For 2022, take one sixth of the days present. And then whatever is the total number of days which you will be coming, like which you are going to calculate after applying these three criterias, if that's going to be more than 183 days, then you will be considered as a substantially present in US, and you will be considered as a resident for tax filing purpose. I'm not saying that your visa status is going to change. It's just for the tax filing purpose. You have to file your normal 1040 return if these three conditions are fulfilled. Okay, this, like, the calculation is correct if it's more than 180. It should be more than or equal to. So be very, very careful with this sign. This is equal to, means exact 183 days are there, still you will be considered as a resident. Okay. So in whole EA part 1, make sure equal to sign is very important. Somewhere it's like just larger than 183 days. This is an example. In credits chapter we will see that there are some topics where it's, more than or equal to, just more than word is used, so be careful with those two words. Okay. Next is NRA withholding. So any person, any US person who is going to pay any amount to a non-resident is a person responsible for withholding, also called as a withholding agent. Okay. So they are liable to deduct some taxes, just like in US we have federal income tax, right? But in apart from that, if they are going to pay something to a non-resident, US person is going to pay something to a non-resident, it's their responsibility to deduct a certain percentage and deposit it to the IRS. Okay. Now when this non-resident is going to file their tax return in their home country, they are going to get a credit in the form of foreign tax credit as per their country's rule. Okay. So many people get confused with the FTC. Mainly, many chartered accountants receive this kind of return that people are living in US and their taxes are deducted here, and they also are going to file the Indian taxes. But that FTC is totally different. That's the Indian FTC. Here you have to remember, it's in the reverse format. You have to remember, when a US person, let's say, is earning some income from UK, okay, and UK government has deducted certain tax amount already, and when this US person is going to file a 1040 return, he has to report his, we will see the reporting forms and everything over here. He has to report his foreign income plus US income. Both income he has to report. He has to calculate the tax liability cumulatively on both the income, and then he will get a foreign tax credit in foreign country, because UK will be considered as a foreign country for this person. So whatever taxes he might have paid in foreign country, he will get a foreign tax credit on that. Okay. In regular class, I think you guys might have gone through this topic in detail, so please go back, rewind that topic, and understand how the FTC calculation is done in case of foreign incomes. Okay. So yes. So what happens here is NRA withholding. That person who is going to pay anything to non-resident will have to deduct certain percentage before paying it. It's the responsibility of the US person. They see, the US government is not going to go and catch the non-resident that you haven't paid any foreign taxes. He said, I am not sure about the rules of US. So the US person will have to pay the withholding taxes. Just like in while receiving the W2 wages, we deduct, the employer used to deduct the foreign withholding, sorry, federal withholding, sorry guys, federal withholding. Just like that, you have to deduct certain withholding before depositing it to the non-resident. Okay. Next is, even if someone has hired illegal aliens, they have to pay the taxes. The US employer will have to pay the taxes for whatever payments they are going to make to the illegal aliens. Obviously no is going to report it, but as soon as it's been exposed, the US employer will be liable to various fines, penalties, sanctions may be imposed by immigration and customs enforcement. So that's a different story. From tax perspective, you have to deduct any taxes on any amount which has been paid to the illegal aliens. So they receives the income. Illegal aliens might receive the income from the employers and payers. Same tax withholding and reporting obligations that applies to other, means whatever federal income tax has been deducted. Okay. Same things, same rules will apply to them. no additional extra things will apply. But if the employer is not deducting it, the employer will be liable for fines, penalties, and sanctions. Non-resident alien receives income from performing independent personal services. Many people do that, right? If they are a non-resident alien, but they are not on the payroll, they are not going to receive a W-2, but they are just performing some independent service on contract basis, they are performing. So they are subject to 30% withholding. So whoever is going to pay the amount, the fees or contract fees, whatever they're going to pay, they have to withhold 30% withholding, unless it is exempt, unless it's been mentioned specifically in some rules. But ideal general rule is 30% you have to deduct while receiving any independent professional fees. Okay. Now if a person is a resident alien plus receives income from the performing personal services, are subject to same reporting and withholding obligations that applies to US citizen. So being a resident alien, you are not going to worry. It's just like your normal 1040 return. Put it on your schedule C. Whatever 1099s you are going to receive, just add it on your 1040 return, and it will be taxable at a normal slab rates. If a person is a non-resident, you're not going to look at the slab rates. You have to withheld 30% from that payment. Okay. Next is 1040 NR is mandatory. Now this list is important. Who are going to file the 1040 NR? NR who is non-resident, who is engaged in trade or business, even there is no gross income. Okay, which has been conducted in US. So let's say some non-resident person is there, sitting in India. He has formed a company and LLC in US. There's no reporting of gross income, or maybe it's generating some losses. Still, that person has to file a 1040 NR. Okay, the person should, if the person is engaged in the trade or business. I'm not saying passive activity. Okay, gross income is all income. It's US source except losses from the asset transaction. Okay, so just exclude your capital losses, any sales of asset in that. If you're generating some losses, that's not your gross income. Okay, other than that, any income which you're going to generate in US, that's your gross income, right? Non-resident who is not engaged in US trade or business but receives income from US source. It can be dividend income. Okay, some person might have invested in foreign stock market, like some people non-resident who has invested in the US stock market, and now they are generating some dividend interest, right? Which is not at all related to trade or business. Still they have to file 1040 NR. I'm not saying they have to pay the taxes. Tax liability is totally different for three different categories, which we have already seen: independent services, professional services, effectively connected income, and third one was the passive income. Okay, but just remember, if you are going to fall under any of these categories, it's mandatory to file a 1040 NR. Or if anyone who has received a health saving account distributions from HSA or MSA or any Medicare related advantage, you have to file a 1040 NR. If your earnings from self employment is more than $400, ideally it's what, like if you're going to generate more than $600, you have to file a return. Here, like if it's more than $400 for a non-resident, you have to file a 1040 NR. If you're going to receive an advance payment of PTC, so PTC, like our regular students know it very well in detail. Just to give you a small heads up, premium tax credit is like when you are going to take a insurance, a health insurance, affordable market health insurance. What these people will do, these people are going to do an advanced calculation based on your based on your filing status, based on your income. They will do advanced calculation, and they will give you a premium tax credit in advance. So every year, sorry, every month, let's say your insurance premium is $100, because they have, so whole year insurance payment should be $1,200, right? But what they did is they gave you a lump sum credit in the first month of the year. So let's say the according to that $1,000 is off, so you have to pay only $200 during the whole year. So instead of paying $100 per month, you are going to pay somewhere like, let's take an example, like $20 you are going to pay every month as an insurance policy, insurance premium. Okay, so you are taking a advance settlement of your premium tax credit. So every month when they are going to ask you to pay insurance premium amount, it will be very less. Okay, at the end of the year when you actually file your tax return, based on your actual income, based on your filing status, this advance premium tax credit gets recalculated. So let's say because of your actual income you should have received only $500 as a advance premium tax credit, right? So it will automatically get adjusted in your tax software. Just try it once, whoever are working in practical life, just try this PTC thing in your software and you'll be able to understand that. Okay, later on, let's move forward, is represents individuals. Any person who is representing some other individuals or who is representing a trust, who are required to file a 1040 NR, they needs to file the 1040 NR on their behalf. Okay, taxpayer held qualified investment in the qualified opportunity fund. If you are going to have investments in QOF, qualified opportunity fund, then you have to report it on 1040 NR. It's mandatory to file 1040 NR for them. Taxpayer who is falling under dual residency status will be treated as a non-resident unless he accepts one, unless he follows the tax treaty. Whatever two countries, in two countries, if he's resident here, he has to follow the tax treaty. And for US, he might considered as a non-resident. Even if he's not having any income or anything, he has to file a 1040 NR for that in that situation. If owns a special taxes like AMT, okay, if the person is liable to pay AMT, if a person is liable to pay additional taxes on IRA, when we'll do the IRA topic, you'll able to understand. Say, let's say you have withdrawn some amount earlier, okay, before a specified age. If you have withdrawn the amount, additional taxes might apply, okay, or penalties might apply. Or if you're going to pay some household employment tax, on this also there were some questions. Household employment taxes is something like, for example, Mr. A is asking, Mr. A has hired someone to take care of their house. They are maintaining the whole house. Okay, they are doing the gardening, they are doing cleaning, and the whole house has been maintained by that particular person. And we will see in gross income chapter, again this topic will come. Certain limit is there. Over and above that, if you're going to pay, let's say, Mr. C, he has hired Mr. C as a caretaker of the house, and if the salary whatever Mr. A is going to pay is going to exceed certain limit, then you have to deduct a household taxes, a household employee. This particular person is called as a household employee, and this is considered as an employer. You have to deduct certain taxes. So let's say Mr. A is a non-resident living somewhere outside in India for few years. He becomes non-resident and he has hired like Mr. C to take care of the house as a it's just like a normal person who is taking care of your house, cleaning and maintaining and kind of thing. So that person is liable for household employment taxes, and Mr. A needs to pay that taxes. And yes, they have to file a 1040 NR even if they are not generating any revenue, but they are going to pay the household employment taxes for Mr. C. Okay, social security and Medicare taxes on the tip income not reported to employer, that thing needs to be reported in your 1040 return. Okay, so anyone who is a non-resident who is still generating revenue from restaurant business, they are going to have some tip income. And if the tip income is up to $20 a month, they don't have to report it to employer, right? So that's the reason why you have to report it somewhere in your tax return. And if a person is non-resident, they will go for a 1040 NR or a recapture taxes, mainly if it's a business property, schedule C business property. When you're going to sell your business properties, and you might have claimed some depreciation. If it's a 1231 property, 1245, the types of property thing we will see in the property transaction topic, the capital gain and losses topic, where if you have taken some depreciation when it was used in your business, it needs to be reversed. That's a recapture of your depreciation. It needs to be reversed, and on that reversal there will be additional taxes, because let's say you might have taken a depreciation of 10,000. Now you're going to sell the asset, or if the certain criteria are not fulfilled, you are converting your asset from business to personal, right? So whatever depreciation you have claimed during the life of that asset, it get reversed. Reverse means added to your income. So your income will get increased, and on that you have to pay the taxes. Okay, so that's a recapture taxes, which we will see in property transaction chapter. So is this clear, guys? Even if you're a 1040 NR, it is not necessary that you should have a gross income. Any of these criteria are fulfilled, any single point is fulfilled, still you have to file a 1040 NR for that particular year. Okay. Now, there are some people who are exempt. No need to file 1040 NR if a person is a student or teacher or trainer, and no income is subject to tax. Anything which they are earning is not subject to tax. Second is student or a business apprentice. Apprentice means like on internship if they are over, they are non-resident, but they are as an on internship basis. So gross income, yeah, this is the standard deduction for non-residents. So if their gross income is up to 14,600, or if a person is a qualifying surviving spouse, so if it's 29,200, then they don't need to file any 1040 NR. If it's above this amount, they have to file the 1040 NR. Okay. Next is partner in a US partnership, not engaged in trade or business. So let's say Mr. X is a non-resident. Oh, Mr. X is a non-resident. He is a partner in a firm X, Y, and Z. Y and Z are the US citizen, but X is a non-resident. Okay. But the nature of this partnership firm's business is not trading or business. It's, let's say, they are just providing some services. They are just investing into passive businesses. Okay. It's not necessary to file a 1040 NR, but please remember there were three rules which we saw a few minutes ago. Yes, if it's an effectively connected income which the partnership firm is going to generate. Effectively connected means two tests you have to check. Okay, business test and asset test. Then you are going to file the 1040 NR, in which the partnership K1 should be mentioned. Okay, so let's say even if the partnership firm is into independent personal services, like they're just providing the services, it's not independent personal services. Independent personal services means Mr. X is directly providing some services. That is independent personal services. But if partnership firm is in the service industry, and if they are not generating any active business, or if they are just having lot of passive incomes, they don't have to, that particular person don't have to file the separate 1040 NR. Okay. Partner of US partnership, not engaged in trade or business, then they don't have to file the 1040 NR. Next is NR filing status. They can only use single MFS or qualifying surviving spouse. They cannot use MFJ or head of household. It's not allowed because the restriction of standard deduction. They cannot take any standard deduction because MFJ HOH has the very higher standard deduction. Whereas single MFS and QSS, they can use this three filing status. For QSS, the standard deduction allowed will be 29,200. For MFS, 14,600, and for single 14,600. Okay. Next is no. Okay. Just a minute. Yeah. So no exemption. Yes, no exemption is allowed for a dependent. You cannot add any dependents on your 1040 NR. Deductions for non-resident, standard deductions is not allowed. Itemized deduction is allowed. On 1040 NR also you can add a Schedule A. But please remember, it is allowed only for state and local income tax which you have paid, charitable contributions only to US organization, casualty and theft loss, and miscellaneous deductions. The item miscellaneous itemized deduction, like let's say Gambling winning against gambling loss, it's been settled off and it has been shown on Schedule A, right? So those extra deductions. You cannot take medical expenses. You cannot take mortgage interest deduction. Okay, so if you're filing a 1040 NR, those two deductions on Schedule A are not allowed. Standard deductions are not allowed because we have a different limit, 14,600 and 29,200. Okay. What are the due dates? It's the same due date. Just remember, if you're going to generate a wage income, being a non-resident, you are on a wage income, plus there will be a withholding by the employer. The due date will be 15th April, your normal due date, plus you can get an extension of 6 months, which will be 15th October. Okay. But if you don't have any wages, there's no withholding. Let's say you're just generating some passive income, you're not on the payroll, you're not generating any wage income, then the due date will remain 15th June. Okay, for non-resident. Okay, guys. Next is, if you are a estate or a trust, then the office or organization is in US, being a non-resident estate, non-resident trust, and if your office or organization is in US, the due date for filing your taxes will remain the same 15th April. But if you don't have any active office or any organization in US, the due date will become 15th June. Okay, so that's one one of the important topic. Every page of this topic is important. Don't skip anything from this topic. Okay. Next and one more topic is, now some people might be wondering, like, when, like, the foreign tax credit, where is that foreign earned income exclusion topic, and F bar I'm teaching right now, but what about the foreign tax credit and all? That comes in the gross income chapter. So in the flow of the gross income chapter, we are going to do that small topic. I'll see if we still have time, because I have to show you the form numbers also. In last few minutes, I'll show that topic, else we'll take it in the gross income chapter. Okay, so see, foreign accounts and asset reporting. Please understand this topic from the angle of a US citizen, US person. Okay, so any US person who is having a foreign account, let's say Mr. U is a US citizen. Okay, and he is having a Indian bank account, or he is having some Indian property. He's having his houses, properties, bank, some fixed deposits, some investments in India. So what this Mr. U will do is, he will have to report it to IRS, any foreign accounts which is going to have, or any foreign assets which he is still the owner of it. Okay, so what are the requirement? You have to report it on form 8938 by the due date of the tax return. Tax return will be due on 15th April, so you have to report it on form 8938. If foreign financial assets, so any assets which is going to exceed more than 50,000 as on 31st December, or more than 75,000 at any time during the year. So just you need to check the balance. They are talking about the balance, foreign financial asset balance. Foreign financial asset means what? It can be your bank account, it can be your fixed deposits, it can be any amount which you have invested in, uh, invested in any financial related assets. So mainly fixed deposit and the bank, I can give you an example. So just check the balance of it, not the amount invested. Take the balance as of 31st December. If it's exceeding 50,000, or if at any point of time it is exceeding 75,000, then you have to report it to the uh, US government. We will see the forms. What are the forms, in which form you are going to report it? Okay, both will have different forms, because FBAR is been not been reported to IRS. It has a different organization. Okay, here, if you do not report, what will happen? $10,000 penalty you have to pay if you are failing to disclose it. Plus, additional 10,000 will, you know, keep adding on for each 30 days of non-disclosure, up to maximum $50,000. Means maximum penalty can go as 60,000, plus criminal penalties might also apply. Okay. Next is now FBAR. FBAR requirement is what? You also have to report the same things. You have to report on form 114, FinCEN form. Okay, so report all your foreign banks, all your financial accounts to the FinCEN. FinCEN is an institution. To them, you have to inform in the form of a written form, that is form 114. Okay, any financial interest which you are going to have, or any signature authority you have in the foreign financial account which is exceeding the value of 10,000. It's just one limit you have to remember for FBAR. It's more than 10,000 at any time during the year. But for FATCA reporting in form 8938, so just remember like this is for 8938 reporting, this is for 114 reporting. For 8938 reporting, you need to check two limits: the limit of balance as of 31st December and the balance at any point of time during the year. Okay, due date is again the same, 15th April. Penalties is like, if you're going, if it's not a willful penalty, it's 10,000. But if you're going to do a willful misreporting, it will be 100,000 or 50% of your account balance plus your criminal penalties. And this is higher of this. Okay, that's fine. If you guys are able to remember the penalties, it's good. Because you know, in foreign related topic, I don't know what's happening, but they are asking it very complex questions on foreign related topic. So make sure you don't leave anything in option, or don't just leave, or don't just skip the topic. So let's move at the types of forms that are important, and there can be one line questions from this. So when you're going to earn a foreign income, which is a earned income, okay, being a US citizen, if you're going to generate some revenue from foreign, then you have to show it on form 2555 if you're going to take a foreign earned income exclusion. Okay, earned income in foreign country, you are excluding that earned income, that is your foreign earned income exclusion. So when we are going to do the gross income chapter, in that, three topics we are going to link: either you are allowed to take a foreign tax credit, or you are allowed to take foreign earned income exclusion, plus you are also are going to take a foreign housing allowance. Okay, so please understand, when you are going to apply for exclusion, you need to use the form 2555. Okay, next is foreign tax credit. So let's say if you're going to use a foreign tax credit, so you might have paid some taxes in other country, and now you want to claim a credit, use form 1116. It's an input form, it will be already there in your 1040 return. Okay, so just mention the country in which you paid the tax. You have to convert it into dollar, because in other country you might have paid in their local currency, right? So just convert that amount of income which you have generated from that country, put the amount of taxes which you have paid on that country. Okay, best example, like we have done a lot of returns on this FBAR and all, is like when the US citizen is holding a bank account in India and they deduct TDS, right? So that needs to be mentioned on 1116 form. It's within the 1040 return. Okay, then 8938 form, just now we saw that if you're going to have some specified asset, it needs to be reported on the 8938 form, and thresholds are based on the balances. You need to check the balance as of 31st December and balance during the whole year anytime if it exceeds 75,000. Next one is 114. It's not an IRS, but it's relevant when you are filing your 1040 return, because it's a reporting of all your foreign bank, right? And more than 10,000 if it exceeds, you have to mention it in your 114 form FinCEN. You are not going to use the IRS website or something. It totally have a different website to file this 114 form. Okay, next on this, I got a feedback. There were questions on this simple form. It is form W8BEN. It's just a certificate of foreign status of beneficial owner. This was recently been launched, like I think 2 years ago or 1 year ago, where you are going to report, if someone is the beneficial owner of some asset, or they are going to receive some benefits. And being a non-resident, you have to report your ownership in that particular entity, right? So it's just a form number which you can remember, W8BEN, which is a certificate of foreign status of a beneficial owner. Okay. 8833 form is a treaty based written position disclosure, which is like not that relevant. It's just, when it is used, you just need to read that when it is used, no need to mug it up. Okay. 8621 is when you're going to earn a passive foreign income from a passive foreign investment company. It's just an information return which a shareholder will have to file, okay, if you're generating some passive foreign investment income. Next is Form 3520 and 3520A. It's an annual report to report the transaction with foreign trust or receipt of certain foreign gifts. Being a US citizen, if you are a beneficial owner, or if you're going to do any transaction in with the foreign trust, or if you're going to receive from some foreign gifts, then you have to report it on Form 3520 and 3520A. It's again the informational returns. And certain last four are sorry, this one and this three things you don't have to go in much detail. You just need to understand for what these forms are related to, when these are filed. That's it. Okay. But other forms, like, it is there somewhere, the time, the limits you have to remember, not the time limits, but the what is it, monetary limits you have to remember for the other forms. Okay. So if you guys have any questions, just put it in the chat box, or even if you post this video on the YouTube channel, and if you still have any questions, you can put that in the comment box. Or if you think like some topic is missing, or you are still waiting for some topic to get added in further classes, just put there in the comment box, so we can take it in the other revision sessions. For foreign related topics, still two topics are missing. Three topics I said, this three are because in summary book these three topics are given in the gross income chapter. So when in the flow of the gross income chapter, we are going to take this three topic all together. Okay. So I think we are done for today. If you have, again, I'm repeating, any questions, just let us know through chat box or through comments on the YouTube. Okay. And again, I'm repeating, just inform your colleagues, your friends, your office colleagues that this is just a revision class which you can just attend it live and get done with your EA exams if they have booked exams in August. If it's later on, no need to take the revision classes right now. You can just go back on YouTube channel and revise it later on after your regular classes. Okay. All right. So we'll meet in the tomorrow's session. Only three specialized return. Yes, in part one, only three are there. But if you're looking forward to learn about trust tax, you can go and check your our part two revision class, because both are freely available on YouTube. Okay, so if you want to learn more about trust taxation, go and check day one part two class. So there I have explained the trust taxation. For part one exam perspective, only estate, gift, and the descendants final return, 1040 final return, these three are important. This three are only the coverage of your part one. Trust tax will come in the part two, because it's the trust taxation, there will be some calculation. They issue usually a K1s to their beneficiaries. Okay, so partnership, S corp, C corp, and trust farming income, this is in the part two. Okay. All right. Again, I'm repeating, these are not the detailed class. This is just a revision. It's a quick recap. Those who are our existing student, you guys can just go back and check our recordings who have already completed the regular class. If you have not completed the regular class, wait for the live class, which is again going to start in uh the 1st or 2nd August. We are going to launch, like, we are going to back on track for the new batch. Okay, so someone is asking, IRD will be included in 1040 return via K1. Okay, so again, I'm repeating, IRD is not a type of income. Income in respect of descendant. It can be rental income, it can be your business income, it can be passive income, anything. So if it is being reported on the trust return, right? Trust is going to issue a K1s to the 1040 to the beneficiaries. When the beneficiaries are going to file that 1040 return, they have to include that. You will see on the top left corner of that K1, 1041 K1. Like this, it will be issued. And yes, it is reported on the individual 1040 return. Okay. So yeah, you can use the word IRDs, like it's not just one category of income. It can include rental, business, interest, all passive incomes, dividend, anything, capital gains, or any active income. Everything is considered as a IRD. If it's not any income which the deceased person is still earning, which was not reported on 1040 final return, is considered as a IRD. This is the simplest definition. Okay. Okay, all right, guys. So let's meet tomorrow and we'll see what's there next in the schedule. We'll start exactly at 7:30 a.m. IST, which is 10 p.m. EST. So please join on time so you guys don't miss anything in the from the concepts perspective. Okay. Bye, guys. Have a great day.